Hello everyone, it's Silvia from Fairlight Tarot. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to have a look at my Chatterbox decks. So as you probably know, English is not my primary language, so sometimes I find myself having to Google words because I really want to be sure 100% that I'm going to use them in the right way. And so I was Googling Chatterbox, or the meaning of the word. And as you can imagine, there's a number of websites that give you the meaning of words. And there's one in particular that really caught my attention. So this one says, a chatterbox is a person who tends to use a whole lot of words without having much or anything to say. If you're constantly whispering to your friends during your math class, your annoyed teacher might call you a chatterbox. And I have to say, I was reading this, and while I was reading it, I was actually sipping my coffee, and I ended up spraying coffee all over my keyboard because this reminded me of so many years spent chatting with my friend at school. So this friend of mine, I've sat next to her for 8 years. 8 years of my life at school, sitting next to the same person. 3 years in middle school and 5 years of high school. And high school was, so I went to a very specific high school in Italy where we focused a lot more than other schools on science. So we had a lot of hours of math and physics and astronomy and chemistry and biology and you name it. And it wasn't the easiest thing, as you can imagine. But I remember us, particularly during math, just chatting constantly. Not just me, not just her, just it was unbelievable. I think that my other schoolmates that were sitting around us were literally just going to, tell on us all the time because we just could not stop talking. And most of the time it was because perhaps we were taking notes and maybe one of us fell behind and the other one was helping out, but it was just having a great time. And I think that because we spent so many hours at school, that was something that we still remember with a smile or even with a laugh, because you spend so many hours next to this person, and in my case 8 years, as you can imagine, that's a lot of hours, and you tend to know each other at the end of so much time, and you tend to know which things make the other person laugh, and so sometimes you do it on purpose and just whisper in their ear something that is going to make them laugh. And that's a way to survive high school mainly, and we all do what we have to do in order to go ahead and make our way through those really tough, weird years. And so today this video is dedicated to her, so my Chatterbox friend. So the Chatterbox decks are, as you can imagine, all of the decks that really it seems like they want to have a chat with you. They talk a lot. They're just constantly, rambling something in your ears. And whenever you pull a card, there's so much to say about that card. Now, please understand that this video is not to be taken seriously in the sense that I have absolutely nothing against a Chatterbox person or a Chatterbox deck. As a matter of fact, I think that sometimes we really enjoy the company of someone who's always chatting. And these decks, I actually love all of them, so there's really nothing against them. It's literally just to say that these to me are my most chatty decks, and I really like their company. So let's have a look. Okay, so there's a bit of a mix between tarot and oracle decks, but I am proud to say all bar one, so we've got 10 decks, and all bar one are mass market decks, because I really didn't want to show indie decks just in case they are out of somebody's reach when it comes to finances. Some decks are can become quite expensive. So these are all next to me, and I'm just gonna grab them one by one. And the first one is the Housewives Tarot. Let me just zoom in. This is a Chatterbox. I find it very funny. It's one of those decks that it's a very niche kind of deck, as you can imagine. So if you're not familiar with it, it's basically the theme of the deck is based on an image of a Stepford wife. So someone who's on the one hand, very diligent, very disciplined, that really takes care of the family, the husband, the house, and everything is perfect. But at the same time, it does have a tongue-in-cheek kind of attitude, which I really, really appreciate. And the style it reminds me a little bit of the 50s and 60s. Not that I was alive back then, but it does give me the idea of what the clothes or the architecture might have been like in those decades. And see, this is, sorry, there's going to be a lot of times in which you'll hear me chuckling when I look at these cards, because that is the purpose of this video. I really feel like every now and then we really need to allow ourselves to just not take things so seriously. And, that's why I wanted to post this video. So this justice card is just so funny. And it just, I don't know, I think that many of these cards have the same kind of tongue-in-cheek attitude as I was saying before. So I don't remember soap pads, but I think I can understand. They're probably used to clean, those really stubborn grease stains on your cast iron skillet and something like that. And so I get it. For the strength card, it's absolutely fantastic, isn't it? And the really old radio for the Hierophant, or I think this one was called Maiden or something like that. There was a brand of syrup that looked like this, and that they associated that with the High Priestess. I think it's just absolutely fantastic. Or, the Three of Wands, and you see what I mean with chatty. So we have this idea of the Three of Wands where you set sail, you get your wheels in motion, because after the Two of Wands, where you consider that your world is too small finally for you and you want to get out and explore more. And, relating it to the housewife chores of cleaning, mopping, etc. I thought that it was really tongue-in-cheek and very, very funny. And the King of Cups, of course, is just, the lazy partner who is just watching TV and having a beer. And you see, there's 2 glasses of beer, so I'm expecting that there's a Queen of Cups that is perhaps out of the frame. Or the Five of Swords, where you're desperately trying to cut out your own dress and sew it and make it yourself, and it's just almost impossible to do. Although I guess a Stepford wife would know how to do so. And the Sun, and you see what I mean? It's so much fun. So you've got the wife who's so very happy, and her joy is because she can actually serve breakfast to her husband. And I don't know, it just cracks me up all the time. I really love this deck. I have to say, I don't use it much when it comes to readings, especially if I read for myself, then I may use it sometimes, but it's not one of my go-to decks. And as a matter of fact, whenever I receive a request from one of my clients or one of my members to do a reading with this deck in specific, not that I receive many requests, but I actually, I challenge the person, say, are you sure you want me to use this? Because if it's a serious question, I'm not going to be able to keep a straight face while looking at these cards. I mean, look at the Devil card. It's so much fun. And so I don't necessarily use it a lot when it comes to serious readings. But it is one of those decks that, for example, if there's a party and it's between friends and I'm asked all the time to give out readings, and it's something that is not serious, but something that is not personal, let's put it this way, then in that case is really fun to use, and I think that it's really, really chatty. And so I highly recommend it. It's a mass market deck. As I said, it wasn't that easy to find in Australia. I don't know why, but I had to order it from Amazon US. But I think it's still available on Amazon US. So if you want it, or at least you want to check it out, I'll make sure to put the link in the description box below. So this was the Housewives Tarot. So the next deck is an oracle deck, and it's the Signs of the Times Oracle by Crystal Benna. This is published by Hay House. So this deck is really chatty. I actually really like this deck. I like it because it's very straightforward. It's a sharpshooter, even though it doesn't necessarily have a lot of keywords. As a matter of fact, it only has one, but I always find that it's very on point. And so I just wanted to show you this because I think that this video can also be interpreted, the theme of this video as a chatterbox deck can be interpreted in a different way. So a chatterbox is definitely someone who's always whispering in your ear during the math class, but at the same time it can also be a deck that is really talkative, a deck that really inspires you with either a lot of keywords or a lot of images or a lot of ideas that come out of the cards. And this is definitely one of them. I have to say this deck is a perfect deck if you want to use it in combination with other tarot decks that have this kind of almost graphic novel kind of style, and I'm thinking about the Cosmic Cycle. Or if you're a backer of the Coffee and Tarot, which made it, by the way, I am so happy about that. I feature Coffee and Tarot in my best Kickstarters of 2024 so far. And I was so happy because they reached the goal, so it's getting funded, so it's becoming a reality, and I can't wait for that deck to come. I actually ordered two because I really wanted to help them reach the goal. I think it's gonna pair up really well. But in any case, all of those decks that have this kind of art style, and I can assure you 100%, this is very chatty, very talkative. It's not as whimsical or funny like the Housewives Tarot and other decks that you will see in this video, but I really believe that when an oracle deck specifically talks to you that much, then you should listen, because more often than not the messages are actually quite important. So the next deck, I have to apologize, but I did say that there was one deck that was not mass market, and that's it. So this is the Mood Tarot, and it's an indie deck. I think it's still available in some resellers around the world. I think it's still available in Singapore, in Lori shops or Love Magic Sparkles. This deck is, oh my goodness, I can't stop talking about this deck. I think I've shown him already twice or three times, or this is the third time that I show this deck in my channel. And the reason is that if you're not familiar with this deck, it's an RWS deck. So you can see that, right? It's an RWS. Perhaps the colors have slightly changed, but for everything else, it's a typical RWS. But for each and every card, there's actually a sentence, and it's either something spoken out loud by the character on the card, or it's something that we can imagine the person is actually thinking. And this deck cracks me up all the time. There's a lot of swear words in this card, so I cannot read them out loud because, well, you know, but oh god, I'm so sorry. I mean, some of these cards, look at this, some of these cards are just irreverent. They're tongue-in-cheek, they're really nasty sometimes, but they're really, I would say they really nail a certain way to read tarot, because if you've been reading as long as I have, or even less, but you have a lot of experience by reading tarot, you will know that sometimes you can't keep on taking the cards so seriously. Sometimes you have a relationship with the cards, and if you're reading for yourself and there's a card that stalks you, you kind of had this tongue-in-cheek relationship, and you go, oh really, oh, I haven't seen you in a couple of days, I hope you're okay, what happened to you? You know, all this kind of almost personal relationship with the cards. And I feel that this deck is made out of 78 stalker cards, or the relationship and the things that you actually tell your stalker card every now and then when you're really fed up of seeing that. Or, you know, it really tells you what humanity, actual humanity, or people in these actual situations might be thinking. And it's just absolutely fantastic. I think they nailed each and every one of these cards. Look at this one. Okay, please understand, as a person with a slight OCD, I can totally relate to this card, because this is the Nine of Swords, and I do go back to my place even after I leave, thinking that I probably didn't lock the place, my house, or I didn't switch off the oven even though I haven't been using the oven in a week. Or perhaps I just try and remember where one of my cats was, and I'm thinking okay, she ran away, so I really have to find her. Okay, don't judge me, but I think it's more common that we think. And in any case, that's this card really cracks me up, because I look at it and it says, I don't know if you can tell, but it says here, did I leave the oven on? Sorry, I just laugh so much, because these kind of thoughts come to me at times, at the most awkward time, and they make me anxious, and I know that I shouldn't laugh about it, but I just love, when you have this type of anxieties, sometimes it actually helps to see them in this kind of context, because taking them seriously sometimes makes you feel even worse. And so embracing a kind of lightness actually helps, and it is slightly therapeutical. And so looking at this and relating that to the Nine of Swords and thinking, that is definitely, that card is completely nailed. I mean, obviously the Nine of Swords is referring to something a lot heavier than this, something that really, really causes you anxiety. But we don't always have to take things too seriously. Sometimes we really need to laugh. As this cracks me up all the time, because I can relate so much. And by the way, this deck is in plastic, so obviously whenever I put the card down, it tends to spin, because there's almost no friction to the cards. But it is one of those decks that you can take with you to the beach, for example, because it doesn't, well, even if it gets wet, it doesn't get damaged. So I just really love it. As I said, okay, a lot of swear word in these cards, and I cannot I cannot say them out loud, but oh look, another rabbit hole. Treat yourself. I just love this Hermit card, because I am very well known for going down the rabbit holes all the time, and it means that I'm studying so many things at the same time, and I have so many interests, which is, resulting in a lot of money spent on really different things, but at least it's something that I really enjoy. 7-finger discount, that's okay. In any case, as I said, really, really funny, whimsical. It cracks me up all the time. Again, another of those decks that I don't necessarily want to use for readings. For myself, I have no problem in using it, but for others, I have to double check when they ask for it, because I have to tell them that this deck is not necessarily something that, I can read without cracking up. So this is definitely a Chatterbox, and it's the Mood Tarot. So this next deck is an oracle deck. It's I'm sorry, it's got gold foil, and because of the light I can't really angle it in such a way that you can read the title, but it's the Magical Spirit Oracle, The Brilliance of You by Alexis Raccoon. This has been published by Rockpool. I think it's been published last year. So this is one of the decks that at the beginning I really didn't know how to use, because it definitely is a Chatterbox, and you'll see, if you're not familiar with it, you'll see it immediately as soon as I show you the cards. So this deck has so many words on it. So you've got obviously you got the drawing, then you got the number of the card if you want to go back to the guidebook and check it out. Then it's got a title, for example in this case is The Gifted Guide. Then it's got a couple of keywords at the bottom: stars, chaos, opportunity, and then it always has a message inside the frame of the card. So in this case is you don't need it or figure it out. So it is a chatterbox in the sense that this is the friend that is always chatting to you, but this is actually the supportive friend. So if you've had a classmate like I did for 8 years, even though it's very unlikely, you would know that most of the time, we were just being so, young and teenagers and living life as best as we could and trying to survive 20 hours of math and science every week. And obviously, you know, the main reason why we were chatting with each other was to make each other's laugh. But at the same time, whenever there was something sad going on, we were just chatting up because we wanted to cheer the other person up. And so this is the Chatterbox that is actually supportive. I absolutely love this deck. I think it pairs up really, really well with the Cozy Witch Tarot, which is also coincidentally another Chatterbox. And it pairs up really well also with the Gentle Tarot, I think. And also there's another couple of decks. I think one of them is this Scorpio Sea Tarot, because it's got a very similar kind of color palette. But I remember that back when they released this deck, there were a lot of us trying to figure out what to pair it with. And my go-to is the Cozy Witch Tarot, because it pairs up really, really well with this, and the messages actually resonate between the cards. But this is definitely it's a different example of Chatterbox, but it's still a Chatterbox because it's a constant humming. But it's something that it's actually done out of affection, because you want the other person to feel better or to be supportive to the other person. So this is the Magical Spirit Oracle. So another deck that is really chatty, a chatterbox of a deck, is the Night Wait Tarot deck by Michelle, Night Wait. I know that this deck is not very popular. I don't understand why. I got it while I was I think I was in Ireland, and I went to a bookstore and it was on sale, so I wasn't particularly interested at the beginning, because I do have a lot of collage or photographic collage or vintage photographic collage decks, which is a mouthful. But what happened was that it was on sale. I wanted to buy a tarot because whenever I travel, I always try and buy at least 1 or 2 tarot decks. I always like to pair up the memory of the places I visit with the decks that I bought. And so obviously this one for me is very nice, because I remember I was in a trip in the northern part of Ireland. It was a fantastic day, really sunny, which is very unlikely, and I had so much fun. And so I associate this deck with that. Now I think that it is such a chatterbox because it associates the elements of the RWS, as you can see, with photograph and with vintage photos. And it actually reminds you a lot of, you know, let's say the themes of the photo could be. So you look at this card, it's the 5 of Wands, and you think about ballet, and you think about, you know, comedy from the 20s, and they're also dressed in such a way. And I really like it, because I think about all of the things that could have been said, that could have been seen, for example, or, you know, the Knight of Wands, for example, is something that reminds me of a Western movie from the 70s. And if you don't know about many movies that were called spaghetti western, they were called like that because they were made, let's say, by the Italian film school, and that was based in Cinecittà in Rome. And one of the biggest directors was Sergio Leone. And so, for example, if you have ever watched or heard about movies like The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, or Once Upon a Time in the West, those were all made by Sergio Leone. And so they were absolutely a pillar of the Western films, or at least I believe so. And I just absolutely remember all of those movies. But in general, these cards really remind me of images that I can reconnect to that. So either it's movies from, you know, from the 30s, or look at that, even that one, for example, or even more recent movies. But there's always something that creates a memory, that creates that bridge between what the card meaning is and my idea, or what is triggered in my memory by looking at these cards. So this one is still a chatterbox because of all of these possibilities that it gives you. This is Pixie, Pamela Coleman Smith. Hi. High Priestess, of course. This reminds me so much of Monty Python's, for example, and all of the movies, and I cannot really disassociate that once I see these cards and I look at them. Or this could be a Akira Kurosawa movie, for example. There's so many references, and because my 20s were spent, but pretty much the rest of my life as well was spent watching movies and reading books, I have so many of these references that I really like to think of when I look at the card. And so this is really chatty, not necessarily because there's any kind of titles. I mean, yes, there are titles, but there's no keywords, for example, in the cards. But it's still a chatterbox for me because it does create those connections that I like very, very much. And, you know, you think about the movies from the 50s and the 60s when you see this, or the 40s. So it's really, really beautiful. And I actually think that it's a very well balanced deck, by the way. It does seem to have the same amount of masculine and feminine energy. And I really, really like it for that, because there's not that many decks out there that have a balanced kind of energy. And so I always applaud the intention and the manifestation of the creators when they actually achieve it. So this is another type of chatterbox. I would say that this is more of a visual chatterbox, but definitely a chatterbox, and it's the Nightway Tarot. So the next deck that I want to show you that is such an amazing chatterbox is very new to my collection. It's the Alice in Wonderland Oracle deck by Paolo Barbieri, published by Lo Scarabeo. This is an amazing deck. I know that it looks like just one of the other Oracle decks by Lo Scarabeo. I know that we've talked about Lo Scarabeo Oracle decks many times, and the tarot community just wants an oracle deck that has at least 44 cards. There's a number of reasons why we want that, and I tend to agree. So whenever Lo Scarabeo comes up with a deck that only has 36 cards, even though, let me tell you, generally speaking, we were used to 32 from Lo Scarabeo, so that they're actually getting to 36, I'm happy about that. We're almost there. Come on, 44 is a minimum. But in any case, we have the tendency to just dismiss these decks lately, or at least I do. I don't mean to say that everyone does. But what happens is that there's so many published by Lo Scarabeo that are just a bit of a hit and miss. Sometimes because they don't have keywords, they just have the images, and granted they're really beautiful, but at the same time they are not intuitive enough for readers to actually use them. Or perhaps they're just I don't want to say pointless, but let's say that they are decks that don't necessarily find their niche, their spot, their use in a collector's collection or in a reader's collection. But when it comes to this deck, apart from the fact that it is based on Alice, but it's a very modern take on Alice, I just absolutely love it. I love everything about this deck. I love the backs. I love the, well, obviously the art style is amazing. I love the color palette, but I actually really love the keywords or titles at the bottom. So it is just an amazing association between the titles and the images. So the reason why I got this deck was because I saw two cards that really made it for me, and one of them was this one. So this is called A Girl or a Snake. Let me just zoom in a bit more. So this one is the part, if you're not familiar with Alice in Wonderland, there's this part where Alice is really confused at a certain point in the book, and she doesn't know what to do, and she takes pretty much anyone's advice. So if someone tells them, oh yeah, you should drink that, or no, you should actually eat that, or you should go that way, or you should go that way, she actually does everything she's been told. And well, the consequences are not always the best. So what happens that at a certain point she's been recommended to eat out of a mushroom, and first I believe she shrinks down and then she actually balloons up, but it's not like at the beginning where she becomes like a giant. Now she is really big, but what happens is that her neck grows indefinitely, and it becomes really, really long. And so at a certain point, there's a pigeon that looks down at her, and the pigeon actually thinks that Alice is a snake. And so Alice tries and explain that she's not a snake, she's just a girl. And, the pigeon shouldn't just look at her appearance. And there's a bit of a discussion about whether she actually is a snake or not. And the pigeon just concludes that no matter what Alice said, she is a snake to him. And so it behaves in such a way that, it just acts as a consequence as if she were indeed a snake. I love this card because there's so many times in which I can relate to this, where the appearance, my appearance in particular, or somebody else's appearance, are just communicating something that is actually not the entire story about a person. And so I strongly believe that, yes, you can have first impressions about someone, but you need to be open-minded and understand that there's second impressions and third impressions, and then there's spending years and years talking to this person, and then maybe, just maybe, you can say that you actually know this person. So I really, really like this card. It really resonated for me. And so that was one of the cards that actually pushed me to buy this deck. But there was another one. And as always, let me try and find it. Oh, this one, for example, was really, really, it just looks stunning. I mean, that's about the scene in which there's a mad tea party, and it's just amazing because I love the expression of the Mad Hatter. The Mad Hatter is this really eccentric, weird character, and it's just so detached, and we love that about the Mad Hatter because Alice is going through something really, really terrible to go through. I mean, she's lost. She doesn't know where she is. She has a lot of confrontations. She's seeing things that are very difficult to explain. And she also goes through a lot of personal, let's say, defeats because she's trying to save herself, but she can't. She thought she found friends, but they betrayed her, and then she finds herself fighting for her own life. So it's not necessarily something that, you can just be the bystander and watch over and just, see it unfolding as if it were a movie. If you're part of it, human beings are generally called to be empathetic and at least try and help. But the Mad Hatter is absolutely detached. And I love that about that character in the book. And I think it was very well built as a character. And I think that this card in this specific art style and representation is absolutely spot on how to show that detachment of the Mad Hatter. The door in the tree, that is so beautiful because it does give you some kind of an omen that there's something afoot, and it's not necessarily something happy or something safe. Let me just find the card. The playing croquet, I just really love it. And the fact that when Alice is trying to play croquet, every time so these are flamingos, I believe they're called in English. Every time the flamingos they move their neck, it's impossible to use them as a cricket bat. They're always moving, and she's losing points, and she's really struggling and frustrated. The griffin and the mock turtle, this is really beautiful. The lobster quadrille, the knave of heart. Let me just find, see, that's another card of the Mad Hatter, which I really, really love. I just really think that it's the character here is really nailed. The Duchess Cook. There you go. That was the card that, even more than the other card, really convinced me to buy this deck. So this card says, making use of the ink. And if you follow my channel, you will know that I am also a fountain pen collector, and especially I am a collector of fountain pen inks. I absolutely love inks of any kind. The shiny, not so much. The shimmering, I love. The chromo shading are my favorite. And so I have a collection which is growing because I just buy samples. So obviously it's not very expensive. With a couple of dollars, you can get a 2mm sample, which is excellent. But I have so many, and you know, like everyone else, if you know about fountain pen hobbies, if you like fountain pen inks and you have a lot of bottles in your collection, you will probably at a certain point in your collection, chances are you thought to yourself, I would never be able to use all that ink even if I lived 1,000 years, because it's just so much. And that is something that all of us think. And obviously I have been having thoughts about giving out inks to people just as a present, because, and I actually do that sometimes because, you know, at the end of the day, I just want other people to have a look at these inks because they're just so beautiful. And so sharing my collection is something that really gives me joy. And it's also a way to go through the inks, because otherwise, if I just go through them by writing, it is gonna take me like 10,000 years by now. So making use of the ink is kind of an encouragement card for me, because it tells me that on the one hand, I don't need to buy more because I have enough already. But on the other hand, it's also a method of reminding myself that I am on a journey, and everything that I'm doing is a step forward. Sometimes there can be a step backwards, but it doesn't matter, just as long as I keep on moving. And there is this kind of fluidity in the card, which I really, really love and appreciate. And also because this is a joke between, you know, in the fountain pen community, that, you know, you have to make use of all of your ink, and everyone chuckles because we know that it's impossible. So I find that this deck is really chatty, Tweedledee and Tweedledum, of course. It's a very chatty deck, and it's a beautiful deck, and I have to say I cannot wait to start using it and see what I want to pair it with, because I really love the art style as well. As I said, 36 cards. Had it been 44, I would have been happier, but 36 is still better than 32. So, you know, we have to praise the publishing companies when they're actually doing something right. So please, up to 44 cards, that would be even better, Lo Scarabeo. So this is a Chatterbox of a deck, and it's Alice in Wonderland by Paolo Barbier. So the next deck is another Chatterbox that is really making me laugh all the time. And this is the Zombie Tarot, again, another mass market deck. This one was from a couple of years ago, a few years ago. I've had it for a while. It's one of those decks that it's just so funny. Every single card is set in this dystopian future in which zombies have actually won the battle with humanity. And so we have to live together with zombies. So there's still human beings that are engaged in daily activities like, you know, skating, and they are at the same time they are chased by a zombie. Or, you know, there's still people watching TV. You know, you find yourself surrounded by zombies in the Nine of Wands, because, you know, it's the overwhelm and the resilience. So it's just every single one of these cards. It's just so funny for me, and I appreciate this so much. I remember I was recently talking about this deck with someone. I was saying, you know, this is one of the decks that actually I appreciate, because it not only gives me a really good sense of the card, because I believe that all of the images here are spot on, but it's also because it really cheers me up. It is, sorry, but the Three of Cups with the human groom and the zombie wife, it's just really cracks me up. So the concept here obviously is by itself will be something related to many horror movies or horror books. I am a fan of the genre, so I have been reading quite a few. I've also watched a lot of zombie movies. Some of my favorites, well, the oldies, for example, but one of my favorites is not that old, is World War Z. I actually really loved all, you know, the way in which the movie was set up. I also loved The Last of Us, even though it wasn't necessarily a zombie, but it was still like a parasite or a fungus that was, you know, taking humans and turning them into zombie-like creatures. So there's so much in literature and movie production and TV show production. The Walking Dead comes to mind, for example. And so if you look at those movies or books or TV shows, Zombies are not entirely something to laugh about. There's only one book that I can think of that is actually presented in a bit of a comedic key. I don't remember what it's called, but it's the story of this human girl that falls in love with a zombie guy. And it is actually very, very funny. I think well, I read it as a book, but I think it may have become either a movie or I think it was called something like Cold Bodies. I could be wrong, but in any case, that was, in my experience, or you know, for what I read or watched, it was the only one that could be seen as something funny. But this deck is just so whimsical. I absolutely love it, and it's also tongue-in-cheek, and it is a chatterbox because every single card, it makes you chuckle, but it also makes you look at the card itself, and it makes you think about the card and the situation, and it makes you think about the card, the tarot card in specific that it's related to. For example, this Hangman, or you know, the Eight of Cups, for example. This is brilliant because on the one hand, it really tells you the meaning of the card. So the Eight of Cups, which is representing someone that believes that there's nothing left for them in the situation they were in, and so they decided to just break the, you know, burn down the bridge and just leave. And that is just fantastic because that is exactly what's happening here. This human looks back behind their shoulder and they see that there's a storm coming, and there's lots and lots of zombies that are after her. And so she's like, that's it, I'm leaving. I packed up, I got my coat, I've got my suitcases, and I'm just leaving. There's nothing for me left in here. So there's a lot in this card that really talks to me because it is following the RWS as a system, but it's definitely not following it when it comes to symbology. And so obviously you see the card, you understand the artwork and what the meaning of the card wants to be. And at the same time, you think back at the RWS. So there's a number of words that come to you, whether they're keywords or relatable words, and it's just an amazing experience to use this deck. I also have to say that it's very spot on in the readings, probably because it doesn't have any kind of filter. This is not one of those decks that wants to make you feel better. Whenever there's a Six of Swords, you know, it's an actual Six of Swords, so you're really forced into this kind of journey. You're not necessarily happy about it, and there's a lot of zombies that are trying to swim. I didn't know zombie could swim. So they're swimming to your canoe, and you're surrounded. You do have a machine gun, but it's not necessarily a happy situation. You think that it's going to be okay, but you need to get out of here first. So as you can see, it is very chatty, and it's also a funny kind of chat because, there's so many couples throughout the whole deck that are mixed couples. So one of the two would be a human and the other one would be a zombie. And I just absolutely love, oh gosh, the Two of Hazards with a half a zombie used as a pet by a human scientist. I mean, seriously, this deck is fantastic, and I love that the devil is actually a this vending machine that sells cigarettes. So, but as you can see, there's a zombie here, and at the same time, you can see that there's a human hand holding a cigarette behind the wall. And so because there's a zombie behind the wall, you think that that's what actually happened. So the man didn't actually die because of the cigarettes, but he died because the zombie was, eating their brains. Or, the Eight of Hazards, that's just a head. It cracks me up all the time. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And the party of the Four of Wands is a party of zombies because they found the human they're finally eating up. But it's a birthday party at the same time, and so everyone brings presents, and guess what? The presents are actually bones. I just really love when someone actually has the idea of creating something like this, I think that this is actual genius. This is actual genius because you not only need to know really well your tarot and how to read the cards, but you also need to have that kind of humor that lets you create something this funny. So I love my Chatterbox of a decks, and this is the Zombie Tarot. So the next deck is the Dreamweaver's Oracle by Colette Baron Reid. This has been published by Hay House. This is another chatty deck, but it's more like a supportive deck again, in the sense that like the Magical Spirit, for example, this situates more or less in the same type of category. And I have to say, I don't see this deck very often on social media. I don't understand why, because I believe it's actually really good as an oracle deck, perhaps because it's rather difficult to find a tarot deck to pair it with. That could possibly be a reason, but other than that, this is a very talkative deck, not only because it's so very busy, as you can see, you know, with the art style and the symbols that you can see on the cards, or it's also because the association between the sentences and the messages that you see on the cards and the artwork itself is really good. So in this case, we have, could it be a dragonfly? So because it's a question, you're actually you're invited to look in a different way with a different set of lenses to the card, and you're trying to understand why could that be phrased as a question. Is it asking me to understand what the essence of a dragonfly is? What does a dragonfly do? What could it represent? And if you don't want to go back and forth between the guidebook, you can really use this deck in an intuitive way. Even Wisdom Needs to Rest. I absolutely love this card. It is very on the one hand, it's intuitive because you understand, you're not told the reason why you are representing, you're looking at whales when we see this title, let's say, Even Wisdom Needs to Rest, but you understand it. So you tap into your intuition at the same time as reading the card and just installing this kind of conversation with the card itself. So we understand that because we know that whales, for example, they need to surface every now and then, depending on the species, but they need to surface to breathe, basically. But they also, in this case, you see them sleeping like this, and it's imagine how beautiful it would be to witness something like that. If you hear a Sasquatch sigh, I mean, how much can you talk about this card? You need to know what a Sasquatch is. You think about a reason why a Sasquatch would sigh. So is it because the Sasquatch is sad? Is it because it looks at human beings and sees what's happening and as a consequence is feeling sad? Is it something because it's related to something that has happened to the Sasquatch? We will never know. But in any case, I find these kind of prompts very chatty, and I really appreciate them. As a matter of fact, this deck, I don't mind that it's very difficult to pair up with a tarot deck, because to be honest with you, I don't really use it with a tarot deck. I think that it's actually best to be used by itself. It does feel like one of those decks that you can pull a card in the morning and then you journal about the card using the prompts, and then you think about this card during the day, and perhaps at night you pick it back up and you make some consideration in your journal. So it is one of those decks that can actually be used by itself. It operates really well, and it is, well, let's say that being called the Dreamweaver's Oracle, obviously there is this kind of sense that it should be reconnected to your dreams. But to be honest with you, I only ever used one, the Lucid Dreaming, Lucid Living, specifically for that kind of lucid dreaming kind of work. Every other oracle deck that should be used that way, I actually prefer to use it straightforward as an oracle deck. So for meditation, for these kind of activities. But this is another Chatterbox because of the sentence and on the card, but also because of the association between the sentences and the images on the cards. And another deck that I wanted to show you today is the Everyday Enchantment Tarot by Poppy Palling. I have to say, I didn't know whether to display this tarot deck for this tag today. It is meant to be a very funny, whimsical kind of tag. And as I said at the beginning, it's meant to be one of those tags that lets you take your tarot deck not so seriously all the time. So it is a supportive tag, but it's also one of those things that sometimes it just gives you a little bit of lightness. It has been very difficult for me to disassociate what happened to Poppy and her deck. I love this deck. It's a joy. It's an absolute joy. It is indeed the everyday enchantment. It does find magic in the midst of life. I love this deck so much, and I knew about this deck for a long time, even before the passing of Poppy. What happened though, it's kind of a very sad event. So if you're not familiar with it, I'm not going to say anything. So you can definitely check it out by yourself. There's been a lot of talk about what happened. But ever since what happened, I have had a lot of sadness when using this deck until, let's say, a couple of months ago. One day I was using this deck for one of my Read Like a Pro videos for my members, where I'm actually talking about, we're going through all of the major arcanas and the constellations related to the arcana in specific, constellation and clusters. So we're going to do this kind of work for a while. And so sometimes I want to change decks. I don't always want to use the RWS. And so I was looking at this deck, and because it's got really large kind of artwork, you can see all the symbols in the cards, and I find it very communicative. So this is, in my view of what a chatterbox is, this definitely is a chatterbox. But my hesitation in showing it today was because I couldn't, until a couple of months ago, detach it from what happened to Poppy. Then I was using it, as I said, for my members' videos, and I started looking at it in a different way. And I reminded myself of what I was thinking about this deck years ago, and how I related to this deck, and how joyous, literally full of joy, I used to find this deck. For each and every one of these cards, there is so much life. There is so much life. And I can't help but, I just couldn't find the life in these cards after what happened. So I know that it's a very sensitive topic, so I'm not going to explain that any longer. But what I wanted to say is that I was lucky enough to work a little bit more with this deck, and now I'm super happy because I can finally start using it again, and I look at the cards with the same kind of happiness that I used to have whenever I was looking at them years ago. And I absolutely adore it. It's a fantastic deck. I know that there's a lot of people that actually trim off the borders, and one day I'll probably do it myself, but it was very difficult to get this deck. Lately, they actually put the prices up, which I'm not entirely happy about. I'm probably, if I find the used copy for a much more reasonable price, I will probably trim the borders off. For the time being, I'm just leaving them on. I tend to use it a lot for readings because it is a straight shooter. It reads really, really well. But I also really like to do my daily 3-card pulls in the morning. If you watch my Tarot Life videos, in Tarot Life videos, I give you an overview of my monthly wrap-up. So I show you my diary, all my journals, what I do, the activity that I do with my members, for example, what I do for myself, meditation and everything. And I use this deck a lot because, well, I have more room. I also have to say that it's probably a logistic reason. I have more room, but it's also because these cards really speak a lot. They talk a lot. It's a chatterbox, definitely. And there's so much happening in the cards, but there's, for each and every one of these things that happen, you have an idea of the card. And so I think that it works really, really well. So it's a fantastic deck. I highly recommend it if you're not familiar with it. It's just really big. You have to be comfortable with using it. If you have smaller hands or if you have injuries, that might not be a deck for you. But then again, I do have small hands and injuries in my fingers and I still use it. I just find different ways to shuffle it, you know. And last but not least, we got another Oracle deck. This is also a recent acquisition. Let me just zoom out a little bit. This is by US Games. This has been written, it's the Wisdom of the Wild Things Oracle, written by Angie Salins, which this year, I think, I don't know how many decks or at least guidebooks have been written by Angie. That I know, at least 4, but there might be more. The artwork, however, is by Eva Boniva, and I absolutely love this deck. I did not think I would have loved this deck as much as I do. I really appreciate the box, by the way. I really like it. So this deck is amazing. It comes with the usual, let's say, can we call it deluxe production? I don't know whether it's a deluxe, because lately US Games, when it comes to Oracle decks, they always use this kind of box, you know, with all the trimmings and everything, and the decks come gilded like this one, which is a gray, metal gray kind of color, which is actually really cool. Glossy cardstock, so obviously you have to take that into account. If you use it for your YouTube videos or your Instagram photos, it does catch the light. But let me say, this is an amazing deck. It's got the same power of images of a Brian Froud deck, but at the same time it feels very modern, but it also feels very tongue-in-cheek. It feels like it's really looking at you because it wants to trigger a reaction in sorry, sometimes just some of the cards really crack me up, so I chuckle. But there's also a lot of depth in these cards as well. So I've actually paired it up with so many tarot decks. I feel that this deck, I don't know why, but it's kind of a chameleon, because it pairs up with the Nicoletta Cecoli Tarot, with the Brian Froud's Oracles. It pairs up well with the Irene Lorenzi Tarot as well. And there's other decks that it's a non-stop experience. You can continuously use these cards with different tarot decks all the time, and you just keep on going. It's amazing, and it talks. It not only is a chatterbox, but it talks really, really loud. This deck is not the droning of the chatterbox. This is the yelling. It's literally yelling at you because of the intensity of the cards, of the images on the cards. But it's also because it really is spot on when it comes to the association between the images and the sentences or the messages or the titles at the bottom. For example, this one that says allow anger. And there is so much red in this card. And you feel like it's really, really good to express yourself, to express that kind of anger, which reminds us of the alchemical element of fire. So the color red, which is associated with that. I absolutely love this deck so much. It's not just because it's actually beautiful, but it's weird. But it's, as I said, it's just really a loud talker. And you know, when a deck is speaking so loud and it's yelling at you, you just have to listen to the message. You just have to. There's no two ways around that. But that was it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. As I said at the beginning, this was meant to be something, you know, to tell us that we don't always have to take things too seriously. So I hope that you have taken it in this same spirit. Thanks so much for staying with me till the end of this video. More to come. Have a great day.